Welcome to this third session on disruptive innovation. In these sessions, I'm trying to teach disruptive innovation with real life stories based on my personal experience. I like recording these stories, and if they help others, then that will be great, and that will be like the icing on the cake. So let's recap the second session, where we talked about the importance of an enabling ecosystem. How do you connect dots to get a big idea? How do you sell your big idea to get started? And to get started, a team of just one person is good enough. So let's move on with the story. Once the idea had been accepted and I had been put on the job of trying to execute the idea with nobody on my team, the first thing I had to do was to refine the innovation. So now Citibank had branches in the 4 metros. So there were 6 branches, but in the 4 metropolitan cities. And so we could handle the sales only in these metros. We could get the money to the central account for the companies and save them about 3 to 10 days because the money would have been lying idle either in the clearing system or in their accounts at our various branches, where we would transfer them once a week to their main account. Now, this was very important, and so the environment and the context is very important to understand, because at that point in time, the amount of working capital limits that a company could get from the banking system depended on their sales. So they were fixed. So if you could collect your sales faster, you could generate more sales. So it was very, very important in a regulated environment to get your money as quickly as you could. Okay, so the price for the transfers at that time was 2 rupees per 1,000, but with a cap of 1,000 rupees, because you were doing a transaction, transferring money. So if you were transferring like small amounts, then the fee was 2 rupees per 1,000. But if you were transferring a large amount, a very large amount, then there was a cap of 1,000 rupees. Now, in our innovative product, we had recognized that there was a cost of money arbitrage. By a cost of money arbitrage, we realized that if the money stayed with the bank in a current account, the bank would earn on that money, but the amount that we would earn would be much less than the amount of money or the value of that money to the company. Now, just in terms of the interest rates prevailing at that time, companies used to borrow at 16.5%, and their borrowing would come down if they got the money faster. So the value to them was 16.5%, while the value to the bank was about 5 or 6% on the float that they would get in the current account. So one of the big leaps in our thinking was that we realized that fee income for the bank would be much more valuable than float income. That is the float in the current account. So we changed the price to be 2 rupees per 1,000, but with no cap. Now, this no cap, in fact, changed the model. And there were people who negotiated and said, no, why there should be a cap and so on and so on. But we were able to convince them that not only were they getting a lot of benefits, but also they could grow their business much faster, and therefore this was very valuable. And we were successful in understanding this and communicating it to the customer. And to top it all, what we decided to do was that if there was any delay for whatever reason, then we would compensate them at 16.5% for the days of delay. So that was a very onerous responsibility on the bank, because if you look at the environment in 1985, when we launched this, technology was in its infancy. There were strikes. There wasn't much telecom and things like that. So the infrastructure was very weak, and we had to innovate and figure out what we would do in the event of a breakdown. So we came up with a very interesting system where we had designated people who would call each other and give the amounts that had to be transferred and credited. And these credit entries would be done in the event of the system's not working manually. So we had to think all this through and refine the innovation. We also had to think of a name. Now, why was the name important? Because we wanted to get the customer to understand that what they were buying was not a simple funds transfer, but they were buying a whole package, and we called that package City Clear. And that was for getting your sales from your metros to the head office instantly. Now, after we had refined the innovation, then we had to get ready for customer zero. So this involved a lot of selling internally. As you can imagine, Citibank is a bank, so it has many departments, many people who have to approve things, like there's operations, there's internal control, and so on and so forth. So there are many internal things. There are lawyers that you have to get approval from. So you also need to dot all the I's and cross the T's, and simple things like saying, okay, a person's going to deposit these checks. So how are you going to differentiate it from other checks? Will the deposit slip be different? How will the people on the desk know that they have to follow this particular process, this new process for these checks? So aside from that, we had to put ourselves in the shoes of the early adopter customers. So who would make a decision? How would we send them a proposal? How would we convince them? The person making a decision, always wanted to kind of look good in the eyes of their boss. They didn't want to take a risk. So how could we make that happen? Now, the interesting thing is that because I was quite experienced in all these things and I had nothing else to do, and I was fairly good at communicating with all areas, and I had a lot of credibility, a lot of trust within the organization, I was able to get all of this stuff done within 10 days. So even now, when I think back of it, I say, wow, it's incredible the kind of speed that which even in a very, very large organization like Citibank, because Citibank India was relatively small, because Citibank India, the CEO wanted to be enabling, it was possible without breaking any rules, without missing a single sign off, to complete all this process and be ready for customer zero within 10 days. Now, getting the first transaction done. So you had to, first of all, reach potential early adopters. Now, for me, to reach the customers, I could not just pick up the phone or visit them and talk with them and so on, because I had to go through the relationship managers. There would be very many products that Citibank had, but the relationship was controlled by the relationship manager. So unless I convinced a few relationship managers, I had no access to early adopter customers in there. So we managed to get that done. And then we had to figure out the one guinea pig customer who would agree to be the guinea pig. Because everybody would say, oh, okay, I'll do this, but I'll do it after XYZ does it. I don't want to be the first. What happens if there's a problem? And so on. So there's always this chicken and egg problem that one has to worry about. And then there was the question of, like, after we had got the guinea pig customer and they'd agreed and signed off on the dotted line, now we had to get the implementation done, which meant getting fresh deposit slips to the branch offices of the customers, meeting, talking with them, telling them that, okay, this process has changed, answering their objections, because nobody likes change. So this is not our branch office, but the branch office of the customer who's going to deposit the checks. So getting all that done, and then actually babysitting the flow to make sure that the implementation was smooth, that there were no hassles, and making sure that you got a wow from the customer, that this was great, it was smooth, and they were willing to give you a reference, which would be very, very important for getting your next set of customers. So this is all I wanted to cover in this video. I want to make these sort of bite-sized pieces, we'll continue this. There may be many sessions before the cash management story in India gets completed. But if you like it, you can stay on and gradually listen to all these sessions and see them as they come, as they are released. Thank you very much for listening.